Hello, my name's Theo Randall. I'm Chef Patron of Theo Randall at the Intercontinental. I have another restaurant in London and also have a restaurant in Hong Kong and Bangkok. My food philosophy is very simple. It's all about great quality ingredients, not mucking around too much and just getting the best flavors out of them. So I've created a delicious sharing menu for Banquist. On the menu, we've got a delicious tagliatelle with fresh pesto, zucchini, parmesan. Then I've got a tagliata, which is thinly sliced, best quality beef sirloin with borlotti beans, roasted tomatoes, rocket, and salsa verde. And then finally, the best, the most purest lemon tart of them all, an Amalfi lemon tart with a mascarpone crema. Okay, so here is the hamper kit for the tagliatelle and the tagliata. So the tagliatelle, this is for 4, all this, so if it's for 2, you just get half of what there is here. Okay, so we've got this fantastic tagliatelle, which is made by a very brilliant company called La Tour. They make pasta the proper way, they use lots of egg yolks in their dough, so it's got this lovely rich taste, and it is superb, best pasta you can buy on the market. Courgettes, parmesan, pine nuts, and basil and garlic. And then for the tagliata, we've got the beef. So a beautiful bit of beef here with tin borlotti beans, so they're cooked, some wild rocket, some salsa verde which has been pre-made, tomatoes which you're going to roast, a little bit of balsamic vinegar, and some rosemary to rub onto the beef when we're grilling it. And then the dessert is a lovely pastry, so the pastry's been made, and a lemon tart mixture. We've got Amalfi lemons, we've got butter, we've got sugar, and all the sort of zest of the lemon and the lemon juice, and we've just cooked it very slowly. So basically what you're going to do is pour that mixture into the tart shell, and then we're going to just put it under the grill and just set it. So you get these nice little sort of dots on top, and it sets really nicely. I've also got the mascarpone, which we're going to sweeten with some maple syrup. So Banquist provide you with 90% of everything you need, but you do need to have some equipment and a few essentials in the kitchen. So we need some olive oil, some black pepper, some salt. For this we're going to make a pesto, so I'm going to use a pestle and mortar, cheese grater for grating the parmesan, pan of water for cooking the pasta, and a nice solid frying pan to cook the steaks. If you've got a griddle pan, even better, but a nice thick based frying pan is good. Also, we've got a lovely plate, so we've got a beautiful oval sort of presentation plate for the tagliata, so it looks really fantastic. Put it in the middle of the table, it'll look amazing. Okay, so now we're going to start cooking. So here we have 2 lovely 400 gram sirloin steaks. So if it's obviously for 2 people, you just get 1, and if it's 4, you'll get 2. So the thing about beef is it's really important to cook it at room temperature. So make sure you take, when you're going to start cooking, first thing you do is take the beef out of the packaging, because it's going to be slightly wet, because the packaging is great, but it does make the meat slightly wet. So take it out, put on a bit of kitchen towel, and just get it up to room temperature, because if it's at room temperature, what happens is the meat will cook so much more evenly and better. If it's cold, it tends to boil on the inside because there's too much cold moisture inside the meat. So just push it down. These are big, thick steaks because they're large, but they've got a lovely amount of fat on, and you can see it's got beautiful marbling. I'm salivating at the thought of eating this meat. It's amazing. So just, I better cook the first course first. So just push down. So basically you're drying the meat. There's a lot of moisture coming off already, and then we'll just leave this to one side when we're ready to cook the steaks. Okay, so now I'm going to show you how to make the pesto. So you can make it in a blender, but I prefer a pestle and mortar because you really feel it. And that's how traditionally pesto is made. It's always made in a pestle and mortar, and a kind of granite pestle and mortar like this is perfect. So we've got some basil, we've got some garlic, we've got some pine nuts, we've got parmesan, and we've got olive oil. The only thing we're going to add onto that is a little bit of water, because the water is really nice to add and just sort of emulsifies the sauce together. So first of all, we get some garlic. So be careful how much garlic you use, because we're using raw garlic. You don't want to put too much. So I'm just going to use like 1/3 of a clove of garlic. Just get rid of the skin on the outside. And then we're just going to get rid of that little bit in the middle, that little stem we don't want. Pop that into the pestle mortar, the mortar, and a bit of salt. So like a good pinch of salt. And then using the pestle, crush the garlic and the salt together. That's the first thing you do, garlic and salt together. and make sure you get it into like a paste, so it sort of becomes really just sort of broken up, so it's all kind of like dissolved with the salt. The salt is like an abrasive, and it just breaks down the garlic immediately. Okay, and then we're going to get the basil. So just pick your basil. Doesn't matter, a few stems on it, it's fine. Just pick that nicely. You know, you need quite a lot of basil because it's going to basically sort of mash into this, you know, this sort of paste. So you need a lot more than, it looks like tons of basil, but actually it will go to nothing. So we'll keep bashing that down. It's always good to put your basil in maybe a plastic bag, or give it a little bit of a wash just so it doesn't dry out, because it does wilt very, very easily. Okay, so just fill that pestle mortar up with all that basil. And, you know, this is granite pestle mortar. It's got quite a sort of abrasive edge, so it will actually break down quite quickly. So it's a good little workout, this. Just bash down on those leaves. So you're basically you're kind of making a kind of pulp of the green basil, the garlic and the salt. So just keep bashing that down. And the next thing we're going to do is going to add some pine nuts, but it's important that you make sure that basil is almost to like a paste. If you've sort of got sort of half beaten leaves, it doesn't taste as good. You want all that juice from those basil leaves to come out, so you get this really lovely kind of wet pesto. So keep bashing, really get stuck in there, really bash that down. This is quite a small pestle. I suggest you get a slightly bigger one, but this one's perfectly okay. So bash down. So basically we've got that stage where it's all pulverized, and then we're going to add the pine nuts. So in go the pine nuts. These are untoasted pine nuts. Don't toast the pine nuts, because with a pesto you don't want toasted pine nuts, because everything will taste of like toasted nuts. What we're trying to get here is going to get the kind of true essence and the flavor of the basil. So bash those nuts down, and pine nuts have got a huge amount of oil in them. They've got a natural oil. So you sort of bash them down, that will kind of slightly thicken up the start of our pesto. So keep bashing. You're going to get sort of few splashes of green basil juice, but there's far worse things to have on your clothes or apron. So keep bashing. Right, now we're going to add the parmesan. So it's still not quite bashed yet. There's a few whole pine nuts in there. Try and get rid of those. Just sort of get away from the sides of the pestle and mortar, and the best way to do that is get a spoon and just scrape away any sort of crushed nut on the side. So you've got this sort of very dense sort of mixture. So put that there, get our parmesan, get a grater, and then just grate the parmesan. Now we're going to need to keep some of this parmesan for our tagliata, because we're going to do some shavings of parmesan. So just sort of grate half the parmesan, like so. And then we're going to add that all to the pestle and mortar, and it goes, all of that. And then, as I said, I'm just going to get a little bit of water. So just a little bit of water, probably about 2 tablespoons of water. And then just bash that parmesan, the pine nut, basil and garlic together. It becomes really, really thick and dense. This is when we add the bit of water. Now the water will bring that basil back to life. You'll get that lovely kind of fresh flavour again. So put some water in, good tablespoon. And then just sort of, can you see that now? It's all changing colour, sort of going a kind of limey kind of green, which is good. That's what we want. A little bit more water to touch. And then push that down. And then we're going to get some olive oil. And this is an olive oil based sauce, so don't be scared of using the oil. And then we're just going to start moving that oil around, getting all those bits of the crushed pine nuts, basil and parmesan away from the sides, and we'll end up with this really lovely thick pesto. Just make sure we get a bit more oil in there. So quite a lot of oil. Keep going, keep pouring it in. I'm just going to fill this right up to the top. Just moving that pestle around. And then I'm just going to get that spoon again and just get those extra bits that are stuck on the sides out. Give it one last really good pounding. And then we just check that, just see what it tastes like. It's amazing. It tastes delicious. A little bit more oil, but it's got a lovely, really lovely flavour, sort of fresh basil, slightly salty from the parmesan and the salt with the garlic. So it's quite an intense sauce. It's got loads and loads of flavour. So put that to one side. And then we're going to cook the pasta. Okay, so let's make the tagliatelle. So we've got a courgette. So just top and tail the courgette, cut it in half, and then just sort of cut it in half again, and just do some strips down, thin strips like this. Okay, so do a few of those. Get a slightly bigger knife. Just nice thin strips of the courgette. And this is going to sort of add a kind of like texture and colour to that pasta. It'll kind of just gives it that little bit more flavour and keeps the pasta really, really juicy. So, I mean, you could do, you could do this with asparagus actually, but courgette's really nice. Okay, so we're just going to pop this in the boiling water just for a couple of minutes. I'm going to put some salt in the water. So water's boiling, put a bit of salt in there. I put some in there already, so just a pinch more, but good teaspoon of salt. And then add the courgettes to the boiling water, like so. We're just going to go in there for like a minute, and then we're going to get our pan, and we're going to heat our pan up nice and hot. So that is nice and hot. And then we're just going to give those courgettes a bit of a stir. And the important thing about pasta is you have a little bit of water with a bit of olive oil in the pan before you cook the pasta. So we'll just put some water in there, probably 4 spoons of water, dash of olive oil. Okay, so we've got this sort of water and olive oil mixture, and then we're going to just take out the courgette. So it's quite wet, so just take out the courgette and then just give that a little bit of a shake. Get rid of any of that excess water. And then we're going to add that to the water and the olive oil, like so. And then all that water. So now we're going to add the tagliatelle. It's quite wet, so we've got this very sort of wet courgette cooking in the water with a bit of olive oil. Then we're going to get our pasta. So we'll get our tagliatelle. Wait for the water to come back up to boil. Just cook this nicely. Then we're going to add the pasta. The biggest mistake people when they make pasta is they tend to overcook the pasta. That's probably the worst mistake. But it's really important to have everything ready, so have everything you need around you. The worst thing is you're sort of trying to find like a spatula or something. Just when you're cooking pasta, just nothing else is going on. Just keep it there right in front of you. So then we're going to get some of the pasta. It's quite a generous amount here, so I'm just going to leave that. And just let that pasta cook. So the pasta's going to take a couple of minutes. The courgettes are cooking nicely, just boiling away. Okay, so the pasta is ready now. So that's been in for about 2.5 to 3 minutes. And then take the pasta out of the pair of tongs. Now it seems quite difficult because it's quite hot, but just add the pasta to the courgettes, the olive oil and the water. It's very important you do that. Don't pour it into the sink. Just try and do it this way because you get much sort of juicier pasta. And the pasta's still undercooked. It's not cooked through yet. So we're just going to just take this out. A pair of tongs is the best way to do this. Or if you've got a lovely pasta basket, even better. But just take that out. Get all those bits of tagliatelle out of the water. And then we'll just put that to one side. And then we're just going to get this pasta and then just give it a good toss. Get rid of all that lovely courgette in there with the oil. So it's all nice, doesn't stick together. And then what I'm going to do, I'm going to add a spoonful of pesto because we don't really want to cook it too much. But we've got this gorgeous pesto. We want the flavour to go into the pasta. So we get a spoonful of this, like so. Put that in. And then just start working that pasta and the courgettes and the pesto together. So it really gets in there. A little bit more. Don't worry, the courgettes are going to be really cooked. That's fine. We kind of want that. We want it to be really almost like they're melting in with the pasta. Give it a toss. Try and avoid using the tongs at the moment because what happens, you tend to get the sauce get stuck in the tongs. So, okay, so a toss. Get a bit more of that pasta water. Just keep it nice and juicy. And then I'm just going to add a little bit more olive oil to that. And then we're just going to give that another nice toss so all that lovely juicy pasta becomes emulsified. Just start to bring the heat up so all that juice there starts to thicken up from the starch from the pasta. Get a spoon, just see a little taste, see what it tastes like. Because remember that pesto was quite strong, so let's just taste it. It tastes really good. It's got a lovely amount of flavour. You can taste the basil. But what we're going to do is we're going to finish this off with the pesto all on top, so you get amazing flavour of pesto at the end. So give that a toss, move it around, just make sure that that is all cooking nicely. And moving that pasta around. And I think we're ready very soon to plate up. So just move that pasta around. So it's really starting to thicken up the juices in the pan. And the thing about the courgettes is the courgettes are great because the courgette keeps pasta really, really juicy, which is what we want. So let's get ready to plate up. Okay, so we're ready to plate the tagliatelle. So just make sure it's really nicely tossed. And then get a nice hot plate. Make sure the plates are hot. And then put a nice amount of pasta on each plate. A few of those courgettes. And then we're just going to finish off with this pesto. So a nice amount of the pesto drizzled all over the top. So pesto all over. Make a pretty bit on the outside the plate. And then we're just going to finish off with a nice grating of fresh parmesan all over the plate. And a little bit of black pepper. So here's the fresh tagliatelle with pesto, courgettes and parmesan. Okay, so I hope you enjoyed the tagliatelle with pesto and courgette. Now we're going to do the steak. Now the most important thing now is to get the oven preheated to 150 degrees Celsius because we're going to slow roast the tomatoes. Now this whole process shouldn't take more than about 15 minutes. So we'll get the tomatoes in the oven and then we'll start cooking the steak. So nice little cherry tomatoes, just cut them in half. Cut them in half so you've got the top, so we're cutting them right through the middle. So we're cutting them basically this way round. So you've got the little thing on the top and then down. So just cut those like so. And then we're going to toss them a little bit of olive oil and a little bit of salt. I'm just going to slowly roast them. And what this does is basically it slightly dries out the tomato and makes it really, really flavoursome. So it's a little bit like, imagine like a sun-dried tomato. It's got so much flavour. Same kind of thing. So we're just cutting these in half. A bit of salt, bit of olive oil, bit of black pepper, and then straight into a roasting tin with a little bit of greaseproof paper, just so it doesn't stick. And as I said, in the preheated oven at 150 degrees Celsius. Okay, so here we go, almost ready. Put them all in, and then we're going to put them on this flat tray with some greaseproof paper. So cut them in half, and then add a bit of salt. Very important to add a bit of salt because it really brings out their flavour. So, okay, that's our tomatoes done. Bit of sea salt. Always use sea salt, you know, don't use that fine table salt. It's not good for you, it doesn't taste nice. Sea salt's kind of sounds crazy, but sea salt's much saltier. And so a little goes a lot further. So bit of salt, bit of black pepper, a little bit of olive oil, not too much, just a drizzle so they don't stick together. And then get some baking parchment paper, like so. Put that in the bottom of a tray, and then give these tomatoes a little toss, and then literally just put them on the tray, nice and flat. And if you can, just turn them over so they're sitting on their kind of rounder sides. You've just got the larger surface area facing upwards. And putting them in the oven 15 minutes will get rid of all that moisture, and it will concentrate it, so you get this much better flavour. Okay, and they go 15 minutes, 150. Okay, so there, the tomatoes are in. Now we can start thinking about our steaks. So we want a nice thick based frying pan, or even better, a griddle pan. So what we're going to do is we're then going to get the steaks, take them off the paper. So pick these two up. You can see the paper's picked up all that sort of excess moisture. This meat's been really well hung. It's been hung for 4 weeks. You can tell there's no blood on it. It's got a lovely amount of fat. It's got a lovely marbling. That's so key to cooking. So if you've got marbling in the middle of the meat, what's going to happen is the fat is where the flavour is. And if you've got marbling in the meat, as it cooks, it's going to keep it really nice and moist and juicy. If there's no marbling, then the meat's going to be a bit dry and can be really tough. So we'll just get the steaks, bit of olive oil. So bit of olive oil all over, on the plate mostly. Again, salt, nice amount of salt all over the steak. The salt's going to penetrate into the meat, so it looks like quite a lot, but actually once you cook it, it will dissolve into that meat. So give that a good basting so that every part of the meat is covered in the olive oil. The steaks are at room temperature now, which is great, and then just sort of give them a little squeeze so they're sort of nice and even thickness. Now we're going to cook this on the fat side, just to melt the fat first. Just going to put a bit of chopped rosemary on there. One sec, just wash my hands. So we're going to get a little bit of chopped rosemary just to kind of give it a lovely flavour. So just very roughly chopped, just a few leaves like that, and then just pop those in. So you've got kind of like a few leaves of rosemary on top of that beef. Okay, so hot pan, no oil in the pan because we want to melt that fat. So it's very important you turn the pan on high and go very hot. Make sure you got your extraction on. Open all the windows. Tell the neighbours. Okay, fat side down. So you're going to put the fat into the pan. And the fat is the flavour, so it's very important you do this. Honestly, it absolutely makes all the difference. So make sure that that fat is melting in the pan, and you can smell it. You imagine that smell of like roast beef when you got all that lovely fat coming off a top side of, on the top side of beef, and they put a bit of fat on top. Same kind of thing. You get that lovely taste of the fat, which is so important to cooking a good steak. So we're going to cook it on the fat for about 2 minutes. So you're rendering the fat, and it's it's like cooking, it's like butter. It'll just come out. The fat will just melt. You can see it melting already. If you look at the pan there, you can see it starting to melt, and there's nice bits of fat coming out. Okay, so while that's cooking, we're going to do the borlotti beans. So let that fat render down. Clove of garlic. Just peel the clove of garlic, and then we're just going to finely chop. This is very simple. We're just going to drain the borlotti beans and give them a little bit of a wash. So open the tins. These are the easiest borlotti beans to have, tin borlotti beans or even jarred borlotti beans, but just open them up and then using a sieve, just put the beans in the sink and then just put a tap on them just to get rid of all of that slightly thickened, syrupy sort of mixture. You don't really want it. So just give that a good rinse so those beans have got rid of all of the syrupy stuff. You can smell that beef fat really smells so good. And then still cooking nicely. There we've got our beans there. So we've drained them, give them a little rinse, pan's ready to go on. And then I'm just gonna get this beef and put it on one side now because I think it's ready. So let's just have a look at that fat. So the fat's really nicely rendered. Put it side down, side down. You can smell that rosemary. Now don't worry about the rosemary because we've got nice big leaves of rosemary and you've got that fat there so it won't burn. So nice heat, not like full blast, but about sort of 75% of the stove's heat. And then just sort of push it down gently so the steak cooks. Okay, now let's put a bit of oil in this pan for the borlotti beans. A good tablespoon of olive oil. Garlic, thinly sliced garlic. One whole clove is fine. One small clove. Just chop it up and then add that to the oil. Let that fry for a second, just for a second or two, and then add the beans. And then just stir those beans around. And those beans, they're already cooked and they've got quite a lot of flavour already. So we're just going to stir those around, add a bit more olive oil and just let them cook really gently and slowly while the steak's cooking. So we'll turn that heat right down, so really low. And then just keep an eye on them, just give them a stir every few minutes, just so that they're starting to kind of break down. And don't worry, they might kind of go a bit sludgy, but it's kind of almost what you want. They taste almost better like that. So we'll just give that another stir. We'll check the seasoning in a little bit, but at the moment they're fine. Okay, so the steaks have been cooking for about 3 minutes in the fat. You can see how much fat's come out. It really makes a big difference. We're going to get a real crust on the steak on either side. So we've got a crust on both sides, and then the meat inside will be kind of pretty much raw. But then we'll let the meat rest, and the residual heat will cook through the meat, so you end up with a perfectly cooked steak. So I'm going to just have a look at what stage we're at. So that's kind of quite nice. So we'll just turn that over. We want that kind of colour on the meat. And then we'll turn it over the other side. Now notice I haven't been turning it over. It's kind of a habit of people, when you've got something in the frying pan, you want to just keep turning it. If you do that, that basically keeps lowering the temperature and the meat will boil. So keep the temperature exactly the same, turn it over pretty much just twice. That's all you need to do. And then you'll end up with a lovely crust with loads of flavour. That's got so much flavour on that meat. And then as it carries on cooking, the residual heat will, as you rest it, the residual heat will cook it. So get yourself a nice plate, that you sort of, nice warm plate. Keep it warm on the side of the stove. And when we've cooked the steak 4 minutes on either side, we're going to put it on the warm plate and just let the meat rest. Now the thing about meat is particularly sirloin. The sirloin is that part of the animal. So that's the cow, that's the sirloin. The sirloin, it's fibrous. That's why it tastes so good. It's kind of chewy. It's got loads of flavour. If you let the meat rest, what happens is the fibres are contracting when they're cooking, so they go really, really tight. You can see that steak sort of shrunk slightly. When you let the meat rest, what happens is all those fibres relax after they cool down, and then all that fat and all that juice goes through the meat, particularly the blood, and it goes through the fibres and it becomes much sort of tenderer and you get a much better flavour. If you cut a steak that hasn't been rested, it shoots out lots and lots of blood. You end up with a bloody steak. So it's very, very important to let the meat rest. One, it'll be tenderer, and two, it'll taste better. Okay, now we've got all this fat. Let's do something with it. So let's just tip the pan up slightly and just put some of that fat over the top of the steaks. That is called basting. And basting not only helps with the cooking, but it also really helps with the flavour, because all that fat going through that meat, all those little crevices in the steak, that fat will go through and it will season and make the meat taste really delicious. You can just smell that fat is so good. The thing about meat is, you know, have it once in a while and cook it like this. Have it at special occasion, because you don't want to eat meat all the time, but like this, it's brilliant. Okay, so if you think the beans are a little bit dry, just get a little bit of the bit of water from the tap and just add it to the beans, just to make them nice and juicy. And you'll end up with this sort of really kind of thickened sort of borlotti bean juice, which is good. That's what we want. Let's stir. Let's just check on our tomatoes. They're cooking nicely. So at this point now, the steak is so thick, so I'm just going to turn it over onto the this side of the meat. So you've got both sides, you've got the fat that side, then you've got a little bit on this side. So you just want to seal that bit off as well, the sort of underside of the sirloin that was actually on the bone. So just leave that for a minute, and then if you can, keep that basting, keep basting that meat. The more you baste it, the better. So leave those together. Now that's kind of we're not far off there, we're pretty much ready. So we did 2 minutes on the fat, 4 minutes either side, and then like a minute or two on that last edge, the bottom part of the sirloin, the one that's directly on the bone. So seal off. Okay, last little bit of cooking, give them a nice toss, make sure it's all covered in that gorgeous fat. Fat is flavour. Okay, now we're going to take them off out of the pan. Once you cook the steak, it's really important that it rests. And this little trick, put the spoon underneath the steak, just like so, and that basically will get the airflow underneath, so the steak will rest and the heat will be even. Okay, so the beans have been cooking now for about 10 minutes, really slowly. I'm going to add some olive oil, a good tablespoon of olive oil, more olive oil, and then just check the seasoning. Just get a spoon so it tastes like. Needs a bit of salt, so a bit of salt in there, a bit of black pepper, and then just give that a good stir. So that's our borlotti beans. So they're all ready to go. So the borlotti beans are done. We've got our rocket, we've got our salsa verde, which has been pre-made, and we've got some balsamic vinegar, which we're going to dress the rocket with, but not yet. We're going to take the tomatoes out of the oven, and we're going to slice the steak. So and then just going to let those sit there. So they've kind of roasted and they've gone nice and just sort of slightly kind of fried on the outside. They've got a nice sort of dryness on the outside. Okay, so let's get the steak. So we've kept it on a nice warm plate, and we're going to get our oval platter. So we've got this lovely plate which we're going to serve the steak on. And first of all, we're just going to trim off the fat on the outside of the beef, like so. And there's a nice bit of fat there, and there's a bit of a sinew, but you know what? The fat tastes amazing. I mean, if you really like it, you can actually eat the fat, no problem, and just serve it with it. But now we're going to just cut the steak. So you need a really good sharp knife. But before I do that, I'm just going to put some borlotti beans in the middle of our dish. So these borlotti beans, this is basically garlic, olive oil, borlotti beans, salt and pepper, nothing else. It's so simple. but they just taste, borlotti beans is the best bean with a steak. And this is sort of Tuscan classic borlotti beans and a nice thick piece of sirloin. Okay, so the beans are all on. Let's be really generous here. This is for 4 people, so we'll make it really generous. So all those in the middle of the plate. And then we can get our steak. And we're just going to cut straight down along against the grain of the meat. That's one done. And this is really nice and rare. So 4 minutes either side, 2 minutes on the fat, 1 minute on the other side. That will give you a nice rare steak. If you want it medium rare, do it maybe 5 minutes. If you want it medium well, 6. If you want it well done, I wouldn't do it, but 7 minutes. But the problem with the well done is it's going to make it dry and it won't taste as nice. So the cat wants some steak, I think. So we'll put the steak on that one. Then we get this one. Take off that fat. So just put the other steak on there. So you've got beautiful, lovely rare beef. Now, do not throw this stuff away. It's like it's gold. Basically, just pour this all over the top, and that's going to be. Oh, I'm salivating. I thought of this. Just get all that fat, all that juice. Then we get some of our tomatoes. So, just a few tomatoes scattered over the top, like so. And then we've got our rocket and we've got our salsa verde, which go on top of that. So a few tomatoes. And then our salsa verde. So this is gorgeous salsa verde. So it's mint, parsley, bit of rocket, bit of basil, capers, a little bit of mustard and olive oil. And then we just drizzle this over that steak so you get that lovely flavor. And the flavor of salsa verde with borlotti beans, beef, and roast tomatoes is amazing. And this is a dish we actually do in the restaurant. It's we tend to do it for 2 people. It's one of those wonderful dishes that is so delicious when you serve it like this. And then we're just going to get some rocket, bit of balsamic vinegar, so a bit of balsamic vinegar. Of course, some olive oil. And then just give that a nice mix in a bowl. I'm not going to add any salt. We don't need to add any salt. We've got lots of seasoning in there already. And the rocket just gives it that sort of freshness. It gives it kind of a nice little kick, which is really nice in that mouthful of juicy beef. And then a few leaves of the rocket just on top, like so. A classic tagliata is beef, rocket and parmesan. We've made this a little bit more gutsy, but the best next thing is parmesan, which is delicious. Just gives you that last little extra sort of taste that makes you want mouth water. I'm salivating as we speak. Bit of parmesan all over the top, and then clean that up. I'm just going to give it a little grind of black pepper. We've got this salsa verde on there, so don't need anything else. So there we have delicious beef tagliata with borlotti beans, roasted tomatoes, salsa verde, rocket, and fresh parmesan. Okay, so this, you lucky people, is one of my favorite wines. It's Selva Piana from Chianti Rufina. And you got Chianti Rufina, you got Chianti Classico. It's not as famous as Chianti Classico, but this is probably the best of all the Rufina vineyards. Selva Piana is owned by the Gentini family, and it's the most incredible place. I mean, it's in a Medici villa, and they've got cellars to just go on for miles. It's a brilliant place. Wine is amazing. It's 95% Sangiovese. It's a kind of, Sangiovese is the grape of Tuscany, and it is so good with beef. I mean, this is just like the perfect combination. What I like about this wine is it's not too heavy. It's not really you know, it's not really kind of jammy. It's got a sort of pureness and lightness to it, which I kind of like, but it's also got the kind of strength that will stand up to a really nice piece of griddled beef. This is a very drinkable wine. It's sort of something you could have every day if you wanted to. So there we go. Well, cork's fine. Okay, so get yourself a nice big glass, a nice sort of glass with a bit of the good surface area on the base. Can you see how light that is? It's not too dark. But it's slightly deceiving. You think it's light, oh, it's going to be really light. It's going to be like a Pinot Noir. It's not. It's got loads and loads of power, but it's got the freshness and it's got the sort of perfect acidity. Chianti Classico or Chianti Rufina are wines that are made for food. You know, you can drink this and have a bit of cheese, or you can just drink it. It's delicious, but actually when you taste it with food, it takes it onto another level. And that's what's so great about Tuscany and its food. You know, the classic beefsteak Fiorentina or a Tagliata or something, served with a glass of Chianti, you know, maybe with the Sangiovese grape, is the perfect combination. So give the glass a nice swirl in the glass. Don't pour too much in the glass, but enough to give it a go. And then you don't have to decant this, but you can just put it in a glass and give it a good twist like this. And then smell it. It smells amazing. It's so ripe and fruity and got that kind of acidity. It's just perfect for a steak. I'm really jealous you're having this tonight. So I hope you enjoyed the beef. Now we're going to make the dessert. So this is an Amalfi lemon tart. So you'll get, for 4 people, you'll get 2 of these pastry cases, which are pre-baked pastry, and you'll get some lemon curd mix. Basically, it's a very delicious lemon curd mix made with Amalfi lemons, amazing organic eggs, butter and sugar. No fat at all. Anyway, so basically we're just going to give this a bit of a stir, and it's important that you give it a stir now because we want to make sure that everything is nicely mixed together. So this has been cooked. So now I'm going to pop this into the tart shells. So now make sure you put the grill on beforehand. So I put the grill on at 100, like the hottest setting. So the grill, put the tray at about sort of 2/3 of the way up. So it's very, very hot. Make sure the grill bars are completely red because we're just going to basically just seal off this lemon tart. So you get a nice little kind of sort of burnt little bits on top, like a creme brulee, and it will set the lemon curd. So you like this will kind of set the custard. So be generous filling up your tart shells. Make sure they're really filled to the brim, like so. And then we're just going to pop these under the grill. So put it onto a flat tray, like here. So straight onto a flat baking tray. So they're completely flat. A little bit more filling on top, like so. And then we're going to pop that in the really hot oven. So when I say hot, it's red hot. It's absolutely red hot. And it's important that you preheat the oven beforehand. Okay, here we go. Okay, so that's the colour we want on the lemon tart. So they've just got that kind of like little bit of colour, so just sort of slightly caramelised, and then just put them on a cooling rack and let them cool down. And we want to serve this quite cool, so make sure it's kind of not cold but cool when we cut the tart in half. Okay, so we've got our tub of mascarpone. So put the tub of mascarpone in. We're going to make a crema. Now, crema traditionally is made with mascarpone cream, bit of icing sugar, a bit of marsala. You can do most things with it. I'm going to add some maple syrup because I think it works really nicely with the mascarpone. So we're just going to add some maple syrup. So first of all, we're just going to get the mascarpone, which is incredibly thick and rich. Then we're going to just give that a good beat, like so. Then we're going to add some maple syrup. So just basically sweetening that delicious mascarpone cream, a bit more, and then just keep giving that a good old whisk, and so you get this, end up with this lovely sweet cream, which you could just have with some nice biscuits, sweet biscuits, but we'll just see what that tastes like. Delicious. A bit more. Put all that in. So that's our crema to go with the lemon tart. So we'll just put that to one side while the lemon tarts cool down. Okay, so the lemon tarts come out of the oven. I popped it in the fridge for about 15 minutes just to cool them down because you don't really want to eat it hot. So let's just take the tarts. We've got 2 tarts here. So we're just going to get a small knife and just cut down through the tin foil, but the tin foil, not the tart. So halfway, and then just to quarter, and then just lift that up. Just get rid of those bits, and then lift up that tart. So take the tart, cut the tin foil on all 4 sides, and then we're just going to cut that tin foil off. And then with a nice sharp knife, just very carefully take that pastry away. It's very delicate because it's slightly soft in the middle. And then with a nice sharp knife, just cut through the pastry in half. You've got that beautiful lemon tart. Look how kind of juicy and wet that is. And it's just slightly set with that sort of caramelized top. So we'll pop that on to the plate. This one as well. It smells amazing. That lemon, that Amalfi lemon is incredible. And then just get some hot water. A spoon, get the spoon nice and hot. And then we're going to put a nice spoonful of our lovely crema onto the plate. Here's my Amalfi lemon tart with mascarpone crema. My favourite restaurant in the world has got to be Osteria Bell'Italia in Cisternino in Puglia. It is the most wonderful place and I love going there. Great atmosphere, tables outside, really good food. My death row meal would have to be, I've thought about this a lot actually, it's going to be poached Scottish langoustine with some Capezzana olive oil. Then I'd have a plate of Tagliatelle pasta with some white truffle on top, followed by a roasted Scottish grouse with porcini mushrooms cooked on a bruschetta. Then I'd have a piece of Gorgonzola naturale cheese with a Cox's orange pippin apple and a slice of my mum's homemade bread toasted, followed by a massive bowl of ice cold cherries, which I'd spit out the pips like Desperate Dan.
Doesn't sound like you thought about that.
My favourite flavour of crisp is probably childhood memories of eating skips. I love skips, so it's probably got to be prawn cocktail. 3 dinner guests, dead or alive. I'd be cooking, I would have Andrea Camarelli, who wrote the brilliant book about Inspector Montalbano. I'd have Rose Gray, who, lovely lady I worked with many years, the River Cafe. And I'd probably have either Stevie Wonder or Herbie Hancock. I don't mind, whichever could come. So my worst injury in the kitchen, probably the worst one was when I was at the River Cafe and we had a wood oven and someone took a pan out and didn't tell me the pan was just come out of the wood oven. And the wood oven, believe me, gets very, very hot. I picked up the pan from the handle stupidly, not with a cloth because I didn't assume it was hot, and actually stuck to my hand. I had to go to hospital, I had to go to Charing Cross Hospital with a pan mark all over my hand with no skin. Very painful.